Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Nathan Steele sat in his downtown Boston office, surrounded by multiple monitors displaying security feeds from various client locations. His fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard as he implemented the final touches on his company's latest quantum encryption security system. The 45th floor office of Steele Security Solutions offered a commanding view of the city he'd conquered through sheer determination and ruthless business acumen. "Mr. Steele," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. Cancel it," Nathan replied without looking away from his screens. The quantum encryption system installation at his Victorian mansion needed his personal attention. Something had been triggering minor anomalies in the garden sector feeds. "But sir, the investors—" "I said cancel it, Marie. They can wait." His tone left no room for discussion. Nathan had built his empire from nothing. The investors could damn well adjust to his schedule. He focused on the garden feed, particularly the gazebo area where the system had been reporting unusual activity patterns. The quantum encryption technology was revolutionary, far beyond what any competitor could offer. It didn't just secure the premises. It created an impenetrable digital fortress that could detect the slightest irregularity in behavioral patterns. The feed from the gazebo suddenly came alive. Victoria, his wife of 15 years, appeared on screen, leading their 12-year-old twins, Alexander and Audrey, by their hands. Something about her movement patterns seemed off, too purposeful, too rehearsed. Nathan adjusted the audio sensitivity. "Sit down, darlings." Victoria's voice came through with crystal clarity. "There's something important we need to discuss." The twins settled onto the gazebo bench, their private school uniforms impeccable as always. Alexander's tie matched his sister's hair ribbon. Victoria's touch, no doubt. "Is this about Dad working late again?" Audrey asked, her young face showing concern. Victoria's laugh carried a sharp edge Nathan had never noticed before. "No, sweetheart. This is about your real father." Nathan's fingers froze above the keyboard. The quantum encryption system's anomaly detection hadn't failed. It had captured something far more significant than a security breach. "What do you mean? Real father?" Alexander's voice cracked slightly. "Judge Robert Hawthorne. He's handling Daddy's murder case." Victoria's words sliced through Nathan's world. "Murder case? What murder case?" Audrey's voice trembled. Victoria leaned forward, her designer dress rustling against the gazebo's wooden bench. "Listen carefully, both of you. Everything I'm about to tell you is very important. Judge Hawthorne and I have been planning this for years. Nathan Steele isn't your biological father. Robert is. And soon, Nathan will be arrested for murder." Nathan's jaw clenched as he watched his wife detail her betrayal to their children. No, not his children. The twins he'd raised, loved, and protected for 12 years belonged to another man. "But why do we need to frame him?" Alexander asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because, darling, once he's in prison, everything becomes ours. The company, the houses, the accounts, everything. Your real father made sure the case would come to his court. Nathan's going away for a very long time, and will finally be a proper family." Nathan's hand moved to his desk drawer, removing a small recording device. Every word was being captured, encrypted, and stored on secure servers, but redundancy had always been his policy. Betrayal required evidence, and evidence demanded backup. A notification popped up on one of his secondary monitors. Rebecca Martinez, his newly hired CFO, was requesting an urgent meeting. Nathan's finger hovered over the intercom button before pressing it. "Marie, send Ms. Martinez in." Rebecca entered his office carrying a thick folder, her expression grave. "Mr. Steele, I found something concerning in our financial records." "Close the door, Ms. Martinez." Nathan gestured to the chair across from his desk, his eyes still fixed on the gazebo feed where Victoria was now hugging the twins. Rebecca settled into the chair, spreading documents across his desk. "Someone has been creating false records of illegal weapons sales under your name. The transactions date back 3 years, but they've been carefully hidden beneath layers of legitimate business dealings. Nathan finally turned away from the monitors, focusing his full attention on the financial documents. The fabricated weapon sales had been crafted with impressive attention to detail, professional work that would stand up to cursory investigation. "How did you find these?" Nathan's voice remained steady, controlled. "I developed specialized auditing software for my previous firm. When you hired me last month, I implemented it here as part of my standard procedures." Rebecca pointed to specific transactions. The pattern emerged during last night's deep scan. "Mr. Steele, someone with intimate knowledge of your business operations has been setting you up for years." Nathan's laugh was cold, devoid of humor. "Tell me, Ms. Martinez, what made you decide to bring this directly to me instead of to our legal department?" Rebecca met his gaze without flinching. "Because the timestamps on these fraudulent entries coincide with regular meetings between your wife and Michael Preston, your company counsel." "Interesting." Nathan turned back to the gazebo feed, where Victoria was now leading the twins back toward the house. "How much would it take to buy your silence, Ms. Martinez?" "Excuse me? Name your price." "Everyone has one." His tone was clinical, measuring. Rebecca stood up, gathering her documents. "Mr. Steele, I came to you because I believe in doing what's right. If you're suggesting I ignore criminal activity, sit down, Ms. Martinez." Nathan's command carried the weight of years of authority. "I needed to know if you could be bought. You passed the test. Now, let's discuss how we're going to handle this situation." Rebecca slowly lowered herself back into the chair. "You knew about this already? As of 10 minutes ago, I discovered my wife conspiring with Judge Robert Hawthorne to frame me for murder while informing my children that he's their biological father." Nathan's fingers flew across his keyboard, bringing up multiple screens of financial data. "Your discovery of the weapons sales fraud completes the picture. They're building a case against me. Murder, illegal weapons trading, probably more we haven't uncovered yet. We should contact the authorities immediately," Rebecca suggested. Nathan's smile carried no warmth. "No, Ms. Martinez. We're going to do something far more interesting. We're going to let them think they're winning while we dismantle their entire operation piece by piece." He turned one of the monitors toward her, displaying a complex web of financial transactions. "I want you to follow every transaction, every shell company, every offshore account. Find me everything. Use whatever resources you need. But understand this. If you breathe a word of this to anyone without my explicit permission, you'll wish you had taken the bribe." Rebecca studied the financial web on the screen. "This goes beyond weapons sales. These patterns suggest money laundering, possibly connected to court cases. If Judge Hawthorne is involved, it's a corruption ring." Nathan finished her thought. "And my wife is part of it. The question is, how deep does it go?" "Give me 48 hours, Rebecca said, her eyes scanning the transaction patterns. "I'll need access to all company records, including the encrypted archives." Nathan pressed his intercom. "Marie, clear my schedule for the next 3 days. And get me everything we have on Judge Robert Hawthorne's cases for the past 15 years. He turned back to Rebecca. "You have your 48 hours. I want a preliminary report every 6 hours. Use conference room C. I'll have it secured for your exclusive use. If anyone asks, you're conducting a standard audit review." As Rebecca left his office, Nathan turned back to the security feeds. Victoria was now in her home office, speaking on her phone in what she thought was a secure line. Thanks to his quantum encryption system, every word was being recorded and analyzed. "It's done, Robert." Victoria's voice came through clearly. "The kids took it better than expected. Nathan doesn't suspect a thing. Once the contractor's death is linked to him, everything else will fall into place." Nathan's expression hardened as he listened to his wife orchestrate his destruction. The betrayal ran deeper than he had imagined, but that would make his revenge all the sweeter. They thought him a simple security expert, a successful businessman they could frame and destroy. They were about to learn how badly they had underestimated Nathan Steele. He opened his private safe, removing a black thumb drive. On it were contingency plans he'd developed for various worst-case scenarios, including personal betrayal. Nathan had always believed in being prepared. Now it was time to implement Protocol Zero, the complete destruction of anyone who dared to cross him. "Marie," he spoke into the intercom one final time that evening. Contact James Rodriguez. Tell him I need to see him tonight. And Marie? This meeting never happened. As darkness fell over Boston, Nathan Steele began planning the systematic dismantling of his enemies' lives. They wanted to play games with murder and betrayal. He would show them what happened to people who betrayed Nathan Steele. By the time he was done, they would wish they had never heard his name. The private conference room in Steele Security Solutions hummed with the sound of multiple computers processing data. Rebecca Martinez hadn't left the room in 36 hours, surrounded by financial records, court documents, and complex data analysis programs running on several monitors. Nathan entered, carrying fresh coffee. "Show me what you found." Rebecca gestured to the main screen where a complex network of connections was displayed. Judge Hawthorne isn't just your wife's lover. He's the centerpiece of a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Over the past 13 years, he's been systematically fixing cases for a network of corrupt business owners. She pulled up specific case files. The pattern is clever. Each case appears legitimate on the surface. But when you analyze the beneficiaries through shell companies and offshore accounts, the same names keep appearing. Victoria's brother, Thomas Reynolds, Nathan noted, studying the pattern. Exactly. Reynolds' hedge fund appears in over 60% of the cases, usually 3 or 4 layers deep in the ownership structure. Rebecca brought up another screen. But here's where it gets interesting. Your family trust? It's been completely restructured through a series of seemingly unrelated transactions. Nathan leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. When? The process began 13 years ago, right around the time the twins were conceived. Rebecca pulled up a timeline. Small changes at first, nothing that would raise red flags. But over time, Victoria has managed to position herself to gain complete control of your assets in the event of your unavailability. The Cayman Islands accounts? Rebecca nodded. Managed by Michael Preston. Your supposedly loyal friend has been orchestrating the legal framework for years. Every document is perfect, every transaction technically legal. They created a paper trail that makes it appear you've been using the company to launder money from illegal weapons sales. Nathan's phone buzzed, a message from James Rodriguez, his head of security. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. The contractor's death wasn't random. What do you mean? Nathan pulled up additional files on one of the monitors. James found connections to 3 other deaths, all wealthy business owners who died under suspicious circumstances. In each case, their assets were transferred through a complex series of transactions before their deaths. Let me guess. The cases went to Judge Hawthorne's court? With Preston handling the estate proceedings, Nathan's voice carried a dangerous edge. Pull up everything you can find on those cases. I want to know every detail, every transaction, every person involved. Rebecca typed rapidly, bringing up court records. The first death was ruled an accident, car crash. The second, apparent self-destruction. The third, home invasion gone wrong. But look at the insurance payouts. The numbers told a compelling story. In each case, substantial life insurance policies have been taken out or modified shortly before the deaths. The beneficiaries were all shell companies that traced back to Thomas Reynolds' hedge fund. They're killing people for their money, Rebecca whispered, using the legal system to hide their murders. No, Nathan corrected, his voice cold. They're using the legal system to commit their murders. The money is just a bonus. This is about power. The power to decide who lives and who dies, who prospers and who loses everything. He pulled up Victoria's financial records. Show me every meeting between my wife and Judge Hawthorne over the past year. Rebecca's programs went to work correlating calendar entries, credit card charges, and location data. They're careful, but not careful enough. Regular meetings at the Westbrook Hotel, always booked under different names. But the payment patterns are consistent. In Preston, he attends every 3rd meeting. Rebecca displayed a chart, usually following major court decisions or significant asset transfers. Mr. Steele, they're planning something big. The frequency of their meetings has increased over the past month. Nathan checked his watch. They think they have time. They don't realize we're already dismantling their operation. He turned to leave. Keep digging. Focus on Preston's law firm records. James will get you whatever access you need. Where are you going? To contact someone who specializes in bringing down corrupt judges. Nathan paused at the door. Ms. Martinez, remember, if anyone discovers what you're doing— I know, she interrupted. I'll end up like the contractor. Nathan's smile was predatory. No, you'll wish you had ended up like the contractor. He made his way to his private elevator, his mind processing the information. The conspiracy was larger than he'd initially suspected, but that only made his eventual victory sweeter. They thought they were the predators, but they were about to learn they were dealing with something far more dangerous. In his car, Nathan made a call to a secure line. Agent Morrison? Nathan Steele. We need to talk about Judge Robert Hawthorne. Yes, I have evidence. More than enough to bring down his entire operation. But I want to do this my way. He ended the call and drove toward the federal building, his plans already forming. They wanted to destroy Nathan Steele. He would teach them the true meaning of destruction. By the time he was finished, they would understand that some men couldn't be betrayed without consequences, and Nathan Steele was one of those men. The coming days would test his ruthlessness, his intelligence, and his willingness to destroy those who had betrayed him. Nathan welcomed the challenge. After all, he hadn't built his empire by being forgiving or weak. Those who had conspired against him were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with, and the lesson would be one they would never forget, assuming they survived it. FBI Special Agent Diana Morrison studied the evidence spread across her secure office, her expression grave. This goes beyond simple judicial corruption, Mr. Steele. What you've uncovered is a sophisticated criminal enterprise. I'm aware, Nathan replied, his voice steady. That's why I came to you. Your reputation for bringing down corrupt judges precedes you. Morrison gestured to her colleague, who had been silently observing from the corner. This is Agent Carlos Ramirez. He's been tracking Thomas Reynolds' hedge fund activities for the past 18 months. Ramirez stepped forward, opening a thick file. Mr. Reynolds' fund has been on our radar for suspected money laundering, but we could never prove the connection to Judge Hawthorne's court. Your evidence changes everything. I want them destroyed, Nathan stated flatly. Not just arrested, destroyed. They plan to take everything from me, including my freedom. I want them to lose everything in return. Morrison exchanged glances with Ramirez. Mr. Steele, we need to handle this by the book. One wrong move, and they could escape prosecution. By the book. Nathan's laugh was cold. While you've been playing by the book, they've murdered at least 4 people that we know of. How many more will die while you follow procedures? What exactly are you proposing? Ramirez asked. Nathan leaned forward. I have resources you don't. My security systems, my financial tracking capabilities. I can get you evidence that would take months to obtain legally. That evidence would be inadmissible in court, Morrison pointed out. It would give you probable cause for warrants, Nathan countered. More importantly, it would tell you exactly where to look. You want to bring down Judge Hawthorne? I'll hand you his entire operation, gift-wrapped. But we do this my way. Before either agent could respond, Nathan's phone buzzed. A message from James Rodriguez, office compromised. Surveillance equipment found in main conference room and private office. Nathan's expression didn't change as he read the message, but his grip on the phone tightened. Victoria had been monitoring him. The question was, how much did she know about his investigation? I need to disappear, Nathan announced, standing abruptly. They've compromised my office. I can't risk them discovering our cooperation. Morrison straightened in her chair. We can offer you protective custody. No. Nathan's voice was sharp. Official channels are too risky. Judge Hawthorne has connections throughout the system. I'll handle my own protection. At least let us know where, Ramirez began. The less you know, the better. Nathan handed them a sealed envelope. Inside are contact protocols. Memorize them, then destroy the document. I'll reach out when it's safe. Back at Steele Security Solutions, James Rodriguez met Nathan in the underground parking garage. I've swept the entire building. Found bugs in your office, the main conference room, and even your private bathroom. Professional equipment, recently installed. Victoria's work? The serial numbers trace back to a shell company owned by Marcus Turner, a private investigator with connections to Preston's law firm. James handed Nathan a tablet displaying the surveillance equipment specifications. They've been watching you for weeks. Nathan nodded, unsurprised. What about the exit strategy? Everything's in place. The false trail suggesting South America is already active. Private flight plans filed, hotel reservations made, money transfers initiated. Anyone tracking you will think you're headed to Buenos Aires. And the real arrangements? Secure safe house completely off the grid. No digital footprint, no paper trail. Only 3 people know its location, and they're all former military intelligence officers I trust with my life. James paused. What about the evidence? Already handled. Nathan checked his watch. Dr. Grace Chun has the encrypted servers under her control. The recordings and financial data are split between multiple secure locations. Judge Martha Sullivan has physical copies of the key documents. The retired judge? James raised an eyebrow. Can she be trusted? She's been documenting Hawthorne's corruption for years. He destroyed her brother's case when she got too close to exposing him. Her hatred for Hawthorne runs deep. Nathan's smile was grim. More importantly, she's smarter than him. She'll keep the evidence safe. James handed Nathan a burner phone and a set of keys. Everything you requested is in the trunk. Clean clothes, untraceable cash, new IDs. The car's registration is under one of our defunct shell companies. It'll take them weeks to trace it, if they ever do. What about Rebecca? She's being relocated tonight. New identity, new position at a firm in Seattle. As far as anyone knows, she resigned for personal reasons. James checked his own phone. The official story about your disappearance goes live in 4 hours. Victoria will be informed by Preston that you've fled the country to avoid arrest. Nathan placed a hand on James's shoulder. Watch the twins. Don't intervene unless their lives are in danger, but keep them under surveillance. I want to know everything Victoria tells them about me. Already arranged. I have her best people on it. James hesitated. Are you sure about this? Once you disappear, they'll move quickly to seize control of the company. Let them. Nathan's voice was cold. Every move they make will give us more evidence. Their greed will be their undoing. He checked his watch again. Time to go. Remember, if anything goes wrong. Protocol 0, James finished. Total scorched earth. I remember. Nathan slid into the driver's seat of the nondescript sedan. When this is over, James, there won't be anything left of them. Not their money, not their reputations, not their freedom. They chose the wrong man to betray. As Nathan drove away, James watched the car disappear into the night. He'd served with some of the most dangerous men in military intelligence, but none of them compared to Nathan Steele when it came to calculated vengeance. The conspirators thought they were dealing with a wealthy businessman they could easily frame and destroy. They were about to learn their mistake. Nathan Steele wasn't just wealthy or successful. He was ruthless and absolutely unforgiving. By the time he was finished, they would understand that some betrayals came with a price too terrible to imagine. And Nathan Steele always collected his debts. With interest. Detective Catherine Walsh sat in her unmarked police car outside Judge Robert Hawthorne's chambers, adjusting the wire hidden beneath her blazer. For months, she'd been building a case against the judge, recording every conversation, every meeting, every subtle hint of corruption. Testing, she whispered, tapping the microphone. In the surveillance van parked 2 blocks away, her partner confirmed the signal. The judge's secretary buzzed her in. Detective Walsh, he's expecting you. Judge Hawthorne stood as she entered, his practiced smile never wavering. Catherine, thank you for coming. I trust you have updates on the Steele investigation. Several developments, Your Honor. Walsh placed her briefcase on his desk, careful to position herself for optimal recording. We've traced suspicious financial transactions through his company's accounts. Excellent. Hawthorne settled back into his chair. Victoria will be pleased. She's been worried about Nathan becoming suspicious. Walsh pulled out several documents. There's something else you should know. While investigating Steele's accounts, we uncovered some interesting real estate transactions. Hawthorne's smile flickered. Oh, several elderly homeowners lost their properties in foreclosure cases that passed through your court. The properties were then acquired by shell companies at significantly below market value. All perfectly legal, I assure you. Hawthorne's tone remained smooth, but his fingers drummed against his desk. The foreclosures met all statutory requirements. Walsh leaned forward. including the Henderson case. Margaret Henderson, 82 years old, lost her family home of 50 years. The property was acquired by Reynolds Investment Group 2 days later. Thomas Reynolds is a legitimate businessman who happens to be your mistress's brother. Walsh laid out more documents. The same pattern appears in dozens of cases. Elderly victims, rush foreclosures, properties snapped up by Reynolds' companies. Hawthorne's expression hardened. Detective, you seem to be implying something inappropriate about my judicial conduct. Not implying, Your Honor. Stating. Walsh met his gaze. We have evidence of systematic fraud targeting vulnerable elderly homeowners. The question is, how deep does it go? The judge stood abruptly. I think this meeting is over. Remember who signs your department's warrants, detective? Threatening a police officer? Robert? Walsh's smile was sharp. That's not very judicial. Before Hawthorne could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face paling slightly. Ow! Now! In the hallway, Walsh pressed a button on her phone, signaling her partner to save and encrypt the recording. The judge's reaction to the real estate fraud questions had been more revealing than she'd anticipated. Meanwhile, across town, Thomas Reynolds' hedge fund empire was beginning to crumble. Olivia Parker, his assistant of 5 years, sat at her desk reviewing documents that would destroy her boss and protect her own life. The SEC whistleblower submission form glowed on her screen. Attached were hundreds of files detailing years of fraud, fabricated investment returns, misappropriated client funds, money laundering operations disguised as legitimate trades. A message appeared on her secure email. Ms. Parker, your connection to James Morrison's death has been documented. Submit the evidence as discussed. Protection arrangements are in place. A friend. Olivia's hands trembled as she clicked send. James Morrison had been more than just another wealthy client. He'd been her friend, and his accident had been anything but. The evidence she'd gathered proved Reynolds had orchestrated Morrison's death after discovering the fund's fraudulent activities. The anonymous message had arrived 3 days ago, along with proof that she was being watched and protected. Somehow, Nathan Steele had discovered her connection to Morrison and was offering her a way out. At FBI headquarters, Agent Diana Morrison reviewed Walsh's latest recordings. The judge is getting nervous, she told her partner, Agent Ramirez. The real estate fraud angle rattled him. It should, Ramirez replied, spreading out financial documents. Look at this pattern. Every elderly victim who lost their home had substantial equity. The properties were acquired for pennies on the dollar through rigged foreclosure auctions, and Reynolds' companies flipped them for massive profits. Morrison pulled up more files. But here's what's interesting. Victoria Steele appears in these transactions too, buried under layers of shell companies. They're targeting wealthy individuals with complex family situations, Ramirez noted, using Hawthorne's position to manipulate custody battles and inheritance disputes. Preston handles the legal framework, making everything appear legitimate. Classic criminal enterprise, Morrison agreed. The judge provides judicial cover. Victoria identifies targets through her social connections. Reynolds handles the financial side, and Preston ensures everything looks legal. Nathan Steele really married into a crime family, Ramirez mused. Morrison shook her head. No, they married into him. Big mistake. A secure message flashed on her screen, updates from their surveillance teams. Victoria Steele had just left another meeting with Preston at his law firm. The tracking devices planted in her car showed regular visits to a private airport where a Cayman Islands registered plane was kept ready. They're preparing to run, Morrison observed. Steele's disappearance has them spooked. Should we move in? Not yet. Let them keep thinking they're winning. Nathan Steele didn't give us all this evidence just to have us rush in too early. The investigation was revealing a disturbing pattern. Victoria and Judge Hawthorne had spent years perfecting their operation. They identified wealthy targets, particularly those with family complications. The judge would ensure any legal disputes landed in his court. Victoria would gather intelligence through her social connections. Preston would create the legal framework for asset seizures. Reynolds would handle the financial manipulation. And when necessary, accidents would happen. Detective Walsh's phone buzzed as she left the courthouse. A message from an unknown number. Check the Henderson property records again. Follow the money through Preston's offshore accounts. She smiled grimly. Nathan Steele might be in hiding, but his presence was felt everywhere. The web of evidence was tightening around the conspirators, and they didn't even realize it. Walsh started her car, unaware that this investigation would be her last. In less than 48 hours, her body would be found in her apartment, an apparent self-destruction that would trigger a chain of events not even Nathan Steele could have predicted. Alexander Steele sat in his bedroom, carefully monitoring the encrypted communication system James Rodriguez had installed. The laptop looked normal, a typical gaming setup that wouldn't raise suspicions. But beneath the surface, it connected to a secure network that allowed him to communicate with his father. A message appeared. Status update? Alexander typed quickly. Mom met with Preston again this morning. They argued about something in his office. I heard them mention offshore accounts. Any surveillance on you or your sister? That PI. Turner keeps watching the house. But we're being careful. Good. Remember, trust no one. I know, Dad. In her room across the hall, Audrey Steele was making a discovery of her own. Hidden behind Victoria's vanity, she'd found a leather-bound diary. The entries dated back 13 years, detailing her mother's calculated seduction of Judge Hawthorne. June 15th. Robert finally agreed to help with the Nathan situation. He doesn't understand yet that he's as disposable as my husband. Men are so easily manipulated when they think they're in control. Audrey photographed each page with the specialized camera James had provided. The diary revealed a pattern of manipulation that made her stomach turn. Her mother hadn't just betrayed their father. She'd spent years planning his destruction. A soft knock interrupted her reading. Audrey, Alexander whispered. Mom's home. Audrey quickly replaced the diary and slipped out of the room. In the hallway, she heard Victoria's voice floating up from below, speaking on her phone. Yes, Robert, everything's proceeding as planned. The FBI's investigation is focusing exactly where we want it. No, the twins don't suspect anything. They still think Nathan abandoned them. Alexander pulled his sister into his room, activating the signal jammer James had hidden in his gaming console. Dad needs to know about the diary. Already documented. Audrey showed him the camera. Mom's been playing everyone for years. Even Judge Hawthorne is just another pawn in her game. Did you see this morning's news? Dad's company stocks are falling. They're trying to force a board takeover. Audrey nodded grimly. Preston's doing. He's been positioning himself to take control once Dad's arrested. The twins had spent weeks gathering intelligence, using skills learned from years of watching their father work. Alexander had managed to clone Victoria's phone during dinner one evening, providing access to her encrypted communications with the conspiracy members. We need to check Mom's study, Alexander decided. Preston left documents there this morning. Too risky. Turner's probably watching. Not now. He always takes a lunch break at 1. We'll have 20 minutes. The study door was locked, but Alexander had long since mastered the art of picking locks, another skill learned from careful observation of his father's security work. Inside, Preston's documents lay scattered across Victoria's desk. Audrey photographed quickly while Alexander kept watch. The papers revealed complex financial transactions, all designed to strip their father of his assets while making it appear he'd been running a criminal enterprise. A floorboard creaked behind them. Well, Marcus Turner's voice drawled from the doorway. What have we here? Alexander spun around, his mind racing. I was just looking for cheat codes. The new Call of Duty has this great Easter egg, but you need specific codes to unlock it. In your mother's study? Turner's eyes narrowed. The internet's down in my room, Alexander continued, letting his voice crack slightly. Mom said I could use her computer if I needed to. Right, Audrey? Audrey played along, rolling her eyes with perfect teenage disdain. He's such a game freak. Can we go now? This is boring. Turner studied them for a long moment. Your mother doesn't need you in here. Out. In the hallway, Alexander kept up the gaming chatter until they were safely back in his room. That was too close, but worth it. Audrey displayed the camera's screen. Look what Preston's been working on. The documents revealed a complex plan to seize control of their father's company through a series of coordinated legal and financial attacks. Preston had created a paper trail suggesting years of corporate fraud, all pointing to Nathan Steele. "They're going to destroy him," Alexander whispered. "No." Audrey's voice was hard. "They're going to try, but they don't know what we know." Another message appeared on Alexander's laptop. "Turner spotted you." Explanation: "Handled," Alexander typed back. "Used gaming cover story. He bought it. Good thinking. But no more risks." "They're getting suspicious." The twins shared a look. They hadn't told their father about all their activities, knowing he'd order them to stop. But they couldn't stand by while Victoria and her conspirators destroyed their family. "We're his children," Audrey said firmly. "Whatever the DNA says." Alexander nodded. "And we're going to help him take them down." The next few weeks would test their resolve. Victoria increased her surveillance, bringing Turner into the house as additional security. Preston made more frequent visits, often closeting himself with Victoria in her study for hours. But the twins had learned from the best. Nathan Steele hadn't raised them to be victims or bystanders. He'd taught them to think strategically, to observe carefully, and to never reveal their true intentions. They were their father's children in every way that mattered. And like him, they would show no mercy to those who had betrayed their family. Detective Catherine Walsh's body was discovered on a Tuesday morning. The official report called it self-destruction, pills and alcohol, a common end for troubled cops. But Detective Frank Morgan knew better. "Self-destruction note's wrong," he muttered, studying the document in his home office. Katie was left-handed. "These letters slant the wrong way." After 30 years on the force, Morgan had retired rather than play along with the corruption he'd witnessed. But he kept watching, kept documenting, kept building his case. Walsh had been his protege, carrying on his work. Now she was dead, and Herb's self-destruction had triggered exactly what she'd planned. Across the city, news organizations received identical packages. Inside each was a USB drive containing years of evidence: recorded conversations, financial records, court documents. Judge Robert Hawthorne's voice featured prominently, discussing fixed cases and arranged accidents with a casualness that chilled even veteran reporters. Morgan's phone rang, a secure line he hadn't used in months. "It's happening," FBI agent Morrison said without preamble. "Walsh's evidence is hitting the media. We need your recordings, already uploaded to your secure server." Morgan pulled up more files on his computer. "But there's something else. Turner's involvement goes deeper than we thought." "The PI? We know he's working for Preston." "No." Morgan's voice was grim. "He's their cleaner. I have footage of him entering Walsh's building the night she died. Same clothes he wore at 3 other accidental deaths." "Can you prove it?" "Better. I can prove he was acting on direct orders. Walsh wore a wire to her last meeting with Victoria Steele. The recording was automatically uploaded to my private server. In his hidden location, Nathan Steele received the news of Walsh's death with cold calculation. The detective's death had been predicted, factored into his plans as a probable outcome. What Victoria and Hawthorne didn't realize was how thoroughly Walsh had prepared for this possibility. "Your wife is getting nervous," James Rodriguez reported via Secure Channel. "She's been making frequent trips to the private airfield. Preston's moved most of his liquid assets offshore. And the judge? Still playing his role, but he's documenting everything. Wearing a wire to meetings, keeping records. He thinks it's insurance." Nathan's laugh was without humor. "He's building evidence against himself. Typical judicial arrogance. Thinking he's the smartest person in the room." The conspiracy's response to Walsh's death was predictable. Victoria accelerated their plans to frame Nathan. Preston filed emergency motions to freeze company assets. Turner increased surveillance on the twins. What they didn't expect was James Rodriguez's arrest. "Breaking news," the television announced. James Rodriguez, head of security for Steele Security Solutions, has been arrested on terrorism charges. Documents link him to extremist groups. Victoria allowed herself a small smile as she watched the news. Rodriguez had been too loyal to Nathan, too dangerous to their plans. The fabricated evidence linking him to terrorist organizations would ensure he spent years in federal prison. But the conspiracy's victory was short-lived. In her MIT laboratory, Dr. Grace Chin stared at her computer screen, watching patterns emerge from the financial data. She'd written the encryption algorithm herself, designed to be unbreakable. But every code had a signature, and this one was familiar. "Found you," she whispered, tracing the pattern through dozens of fraudulent transactions. Every digital forgery, every falsified record, every fabricated document, all carried the same encrypted signature, and all led back to a hidden server in Preston's law firm. The conspiracy had overplayed their hand. In trying to destroy Nathan Steele's allies, they'd exposed their own vulnerabilities. Walsh's death had scattered seeds of evidence across the city. Rodriguez's arrest had drawn federal attention to their fabricated terrorism claims. And in the shadows, Nathan Steele watched it all unfold according to plan. Every move they made drew them deeper into his trap. Their arrogance, their greed, their belief in their own invulnerability, all would contribute to their downfall. They thought framing James Rodriguez would weaken Nathan's position. Instead, it gave federal agencies probable cause to investigate the source of the terrorism claims. They believed killing Catherine Walsh would silence her. Instead, her death released evidence she'd spent months preparing. The game was entering its final phase. Victoria and her conspirators had played their cards, thinking they held the winning hand. They didn't realize they were playing by Nathan's rules, following a script he'd written the moment he discovered their betrayal. Soon, they would understand exactly who they were dealing with. Nathan Steele hadn't built his empire by being forgiving. He hadn't succeeded by showing mercy to his enemies. And he certainly hadn't survived by leaving betrayal unpunished. Dr. Chen's discovery of the encrypted signature threatened to unravel everything Preston had built. The fabricated evidence against Rodriguez, Walsh's calculated death, the financial trails, all of it connected back to Preston's hidden server. The conspiracy had thought themselves clever, turning Rodriguez's arrest into a victory. Instead, they'd exposed their own methods, their own signatures, their own vulnerabilities. In his hidden location, Nathan Steele reviewed Chen's findings. The pieces were falling into place, though not in the way Victoria and her conspirators expected. They still believed they were the hunters. They hadn't yet realized they were the prey. Claire Bennett's law office buzzed with activity as her team processed the mountain of evidence Nathan Steele had accumulated. The defense attorney's reputation for bringing down corrupt judges had made her the perfect choice for this endgame. Another case file from 2009, an assistant announced, adding to the growing pile. Judge Hawthorne ruled against Ms. Bennett's brother despite overwhelming evidence of innocence. Claire examined the document, her expression hardening. He didn't just rule against Daniel. He deliberately misconstrued evidence to ensure a guilty verdict. Nathan Steele stood by the window, watching the team work. After months in hiding, he'd emerged with a devastating arsenal of evidence that would destroy everyone who had betrayed him. "Tell me about the brothers' case," he prompted. Claire's fingers tightened on the file. Daniel was prosecuted for fraud. The evidence clearly showed he was innocent. In fact, he had documentation proving he'd tried to expose corruption at his investment firm. Hawthorne excluded the evidence, claiming procedural violations that didn't exist. "A warning shot," Nathan observed. "You were getting too close to his operation. I spent years trying to prove judicial misconduct." Claire spread out more files. "Every time I got close, cases would be reassigned, evidence would disappear, witnesses would recant. Now I understand why." Frank Morgan arrived, carrying recordings from his years of surveillance. The retired detective had partnered with Catherine Walsh, documenting Judge Hawthorne's activities long before Nathan's case began. Walsh knew they'd come for her eventually, Morgan explained, connecting a hard drive to Claire's secure system. She recorded everything. Conversations between Turner and Preston planning her death. Meetings where they discussed eliminating potential witnesses. Nathan reviewed the recordings. Victoria appears in these meetings, orchestrating everything. Morgan played a specific clip. Victoria's voice came through clearly, discussing Walsh's elimination with clinical detachment. "Your wife may present herself as a socialite, but she's the most ruthless of them all." Olivia Parker arrived next, escorted by FBI agents. Thomas Reynolds' former assistant had turned whistleblower, providing the SEC with evidence of massive fraud. Her testimony would prove crucial in connecting the financial crimes to the murders. Mr. Reynolds used the hedge fund to launder money from Judge Hawthorne's corrupt rulings, Olivia explained, presenting detailed financial records. Every time the judge ruled in favor of their chosen targets, the assets would be funneled through Reynolds' investment group, then distributed among shell companies controlled by the conspiracy members. Rebecca Martinez added her forensic accounting expertise, demonstrating how the financial fraud had been orchestrated. They created a perfect closed loop. Judge Hawthorne would ensure favorable rulings. Victoria would identify wealthy targets through her social connections. Preston would handle the legal framework, and Reynolds would manage the money laundering. Dr. Grace Chun presented her analysis of the digital evidence. Her encryption expertise had uncovered the technological fingerprints linking all the fraudulent transactions. Every digital forgery carries the same encrypted signature, she explained, displaying complex coding patterns. Preston thought he was being clever, hiding their tracks behind multiple layers of encryption. But he didn't realize the encryption itself would become evidence. Judge Martha Sullivan provided crucial context about Hawthorne's pattern of judicial misconduct. She'd been documenting suspicious rulings for years, building a statistical analysis that demonstrated systematic bias in his decisions. Look at the pattern, she pointed out. Every case involving substantial assets or complex family disputes was steered to his court. Once there, his rulings consistently favored parties represented by a small circle of attorneys, all connected to Preston's firm. Nathan absorbed each piece of evidence, watching his revenge take shape through proper legal channels. He'd spent months building this case, ensuring every detail would withstand scrutiny. What about the terrorism charges against Rodriguez? Claire asked. Fabricated. Dr. Chin pulled up more files. The digital trail leads directly to Preston's private server. They created the evidence using the same encryption algorithm they used for their financial fraud. Frank Morgan added additional recordings. Walsh documented Preston's meetings with the FBI agents who arrested Rodriguez. They're both on Reynolds' payroll. And those agents? Nathan inquired. Already under internal investigation, Claire confirmed. The FBI's anti-corruption unit has been building a case for months. Rodriguez will be released within days. The evidence was overwhelming, attacking the conspiracy from every angle. Financial records proved money laundering. Digital forensics exposed forgery. Witness testimony revealed murders. Court documents demonstrated systematic corruption. They'll try to claim I orchestrated this as revenge, Nathan noted. Claire's smile was predatory. Let them. Every piece of evidence comes from independent sources. Walsh's investigation predates your case. Morgan's recordings span years. Sullivan's statistical analysis covers a decade of judicial misconduct. They can claim conspiracy all they want. The evidence speaks for itself. The team worked through the night, organizing the case for maximum impact. Nathan watched them build the legal framework that would destroy his enemies, appreciating the irony. Victoria and her conspirators had tried to use the legal system to destroy him. Now that same system would ensure their downfall. File everything tomorrow, he instructed Claire. I want them caught completely off guard. They'll be arrested within hours of the filing, she confirmed. The warrants are ready. The FBI teams are in position. Once we move, they won't have time to hide or destroy evidence. Nathan nodded, satisfied. Months of careful planning were about to pay off. His enemies thought they were clever, but they'd never understood what they were dealing with. Nathan Steele didn't just seek revenge. He sought absolute destruction of those who had betrayed him. And tomorrow, that destruction would begin. The courthouse buzzed with activity as federal agents led the conspirators into the main courtroom. Victoria Steele's usual poise cracked slightly as she noticed Nathan sitting in the front row, his expression impassive as he watched his wife being led and wearing handcuffs. Judge Robert Hawthorne entered next, his judicial robes replaced by a prison jumpsuit. The man who had presided over countless corrupt rulings now faced judgment himself. Michael Preston attempted to maintain his attorney's composure, but his eyes darted nervously around the courtroom. The evidence from his law firm server had exposed every aspect of their criminal enterprise. All rise, the bailiff announced as Judge Sarah Chun took the bench. The United States District Court for the District of Massachusetts is now in session. The prosecutor rose, presenting the government's case. Screen displays showed financial records, surveillance photos, transcripts of recorded conversations. The evidence will show, she announced, a criminal enterprise that corrupted our judicial system, murdered innocent citizens, and stole millions through fraudulent court rulings. Victoria's testimony came first. Under cross-examination, her carefully constructed image crumbled. The prosecution played recordings Alexander and Audrey had gathered. Conversations where she detailed manipulating the family trust, planning Walsh's murder, orchestrating Nathan's frame-up. "Did you order Marcus Turner to eliminate Detective Walsh?" the prosecutor asked. "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right," Victoria replied, but her composed expression slipped when more recordings played. Her own voice discussing Walsh's elimination with clinical precision. Judge Hawthorne fared no better. His own recordings, intended as insurance, instead documented years of judicial corruption. Transcripts showed him discussing fixed cases, arranged accidents, manipulated rulings. "Your Honor," the prosecutor addressed him, deliberately using his former title. "Did you knowingly accept bribes to fix cases in your courts?" Hawthorne glanced at his attorney, who nodded slightly. "I wish to cooperate with the investigation," he announced, clearly hoping to mitigate his sentence. Preston attempted to flee during a court recess. Federal agents intercepted him at a private airfield, catching him boarding a plane to a non-extradition country. His capture only added evidence of consciousness of guilt. Marcus Turner, facing multiple murder charges, broke under interrogation. His testimony detailed every murder, every covered-up crime, every act of violence committed on behalf of the conspiracy. "Mrs. Steele ordered the hits," he testified. "She would provide the targets, and Preston would handle the payoffs through offshore accounts." The evidence Nathan had gathered proved devastating. Financial records showed money laundering through Reynolds's hedge fund. Digital forensics exposed years of forged documents. Witness testimony revealed murders disguised as accidents. Victoria attempted one final gambit. "Your Honor," she addressed Judge Chun, "my husband orchestrated this entire case as revenge. He's manipulated evidence, coerced witnesses." "Mrs. Steele," the judge interrupted, "the evidence against you comes from multiple independent sources, most predating your conspiracy against your husband. Detective Walsh's investigation began 3 years ago. Judge Sullivan's documentation spans a decade. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit has verified every transaction. Your attempts to deflect responsibility only demonstrate consciousness of guilt." The trial lasted weeks, each day bringing new revelations. Victoria's carefully constructed image of a socialite wife crumbled as evidence exposed her as the operation's mastermind. Judge Hawthorne's reputation for judicial integrity dissolved under mountains of proof of corruption. Preston's legal expertise proved useless against the overwhelming evidence from his own servers. Every digital forgery, every falsified document, every fabricated charge carried the same encryption signature Dr. Chun had uncovered. Thomas Reynolds turned state's evidence, hoping to avoid a life sentence. His testimony exposed the financial machinery that had enabled their crimes. Every corrupt ruling, every seized asset, every murdered victim had generated profits laundered through his hedge fund. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. On the charge of first-degree murder, how do you find the defendant Victoria Steele? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. The verdicts continued, a litany of guilt for every defendant. Judge Chen's sentences reflected the magnitude of their crimes. Victoria Steele, for your role in orchestrating multiple murders, corruption of the judicial system, and widespread financial fraud, you were sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Judge Hawthorne received 40 years. Preston's attempted flight earned him a 30-year sentence. Turner's cooperation slightly reduced his term, but his role in multiple murders ensured he would never see freedom again. Nathan watched the sentencing without expression, his revenge complete. They had tried to destroy him through the legal system. Instead, that same system had ensured their destruction. The headline in the Boston Globe read, "Judicial Corruption Ring Dismantled. Prominent Judge socialite wife, attorney sentenced in massive criminal enterprise. Nathan Steele sat in his office, reviewing the final damage assessments. His civil suit had recovered $7 million in stolen assets, less than initially estimated, but the money had never been his primary goal. The foundation paperwork is ready, Diana Morrison announced, entering with a thick folder. After the trial, she'd agreed to help establish an organization dedicated to exposing judicial corruption. Good. Nathan signed the documents. Use the recovered funds to start investigating similar cases nationwide. Walsh's death shouldn't be in vain. The twins, Alexander and Audrey, entered next. At 15, they carried themselves with the maturity forced by recent events. Have you decided about custody? Alexander asked directly. Nathan met their gaze. The DNA tests had confirmed what Victoria had revealed. Judge Hawthorne was their biological father. But biology wasn't the only consideration. I'm establishing trust funds for both of you, he explained. Your education, your future needs, everything will be provided for. But given recent events, I believe it's best if you have the opportunity to forge your own paths. Audrey nodded, understanding. You'll stay in contact? Always. But you need space to process everything that's happened, to decide who you want to become without the shadow of recent events. The decision hadn't been easy, but Nathan believed in facing reality with clear eyes. The twins weren't his biological children, and pretending otherwise would only complicate their recovery from Victoria's betrayal. The scandal had sparked widespread judicial reform in Massachusetts. New oversight committees were established, case assignment procedures were reformed, financial disclosures were enhanced. Steele Security Solutions adapted, expanding into a new division specializing in exposing corruption in the legal system. Nathan's expertise in surveillance and financial tracking proved invaluable in uncovering similar schemes nationwide. Years passed. Alexander graduated law school, becoming an advocate for judicial reform. Audrey followed in Nathan's footsteps, using her security expertise to protect others from similar conspiracies. The price of betrayal, as the case became known, served as a warning throughout the legal community. Nathan Steele had demonstrated that corruption, no matter how well hidden, could be exposed and punished. He never remarried, focusing instead on his mission to protect others from similar betrayals. The foundation he'd established with Diana Morrison exposed dozens of corrupt judges, leading to numerous investigations and convictions. Victoria and her conspirators learned the hard way that Nathan Steele's revenge, when it came, was both legal and devastating. Their betrayal had transformed him from a successful businessman into a crusader against corruption. But more importantly, it had proven that true justice, while sometimes delayed, was inevitable when pursued with unwavering determination and ruthless precision. The final ledger was simple. They had tried to destroy Nathan Steele through corruption of the legal system. Instead, he had used that same system to destroy them completely legally and irrevocably. Justice, in the end, had prevailed, and Nathan Steele had proven that betrayal always carried a price he would ensure was paid in full, with interest. Epilogue. 10 years later, Victoria Steele stared at the concrete walls of her maximum security cell in FCI Waseca. 10 years of incarceration had stripped away her carefully maintained appearance. Her designer clothes were replaced by prison orange, her manicured hands roughened by mandatory labor. At 52, she faced another lifetime behind these walls. The guard passed her monthly report from the outside. Her assets, all of them, remained frozen. Nathan's legal team had ensured every penny she'd stolen was traced and seized. Even the offshore accounts she'd thought untouchable had been emptied. "Visitor for you, Steele," the guard announced. Alexander stood on the other side of the glass, now 25 and wearing a prosecutor's badge. He didn't reach for the phone immediately, letting her wait. "Hello, Mother." He finally spoke into the receiver. "I'm here about the Henderson Estate appeal." Victoria's hands trembled. "You're working on that case?" "I'm leading the prosecution task force re-examining all of Hawthorne's cases. We're making sure every victim gets justice." Alexander's voice carried the same cold precision she remembered from Nathan. "Including the families of those you murdered. I never killed. Save it." Turner's latest confession gave us 3 more bodies. Alexander placed a document against the glass. Sign this. It releases the last of your hidden assets to the Victim Compensation Fund. And if I refuse, then I'll personally ensure you spend the remainder of your sentence in solitary. His smile was pure Nathan Steele. Your choice. 2 floors below, in the minimum security wing, Judge Robert Hawthorne shuffled through the prison library where he'd been assigned to work. His 40-year sentence had been extended after new evidence emerged, ensuring he would die behind bars. His former court clerk visited occasionally, keeping him updated on the changes his case had sparked. The Massachusetts judiciary had been completely overhauled. Every case he'd ever ruled on was being reviewed. Families he destroyed were finding justice. Preston hadn't fared any better. His attempted escape had earned him additional time, and his fellow inmates, many of them lawyers he'd betrayed over the years, made sure his days were particularly unpleasant. Last month, he'd been found unconscious in the prison bathroom, though no one had seen anything. Thomas Reynolds served his reduced sentence in a federal facility in Colorado. His cooperation had spared him a life term, but the SEC had ensured he would never work in finance again. Every penny of his hedge fund had been confiscated, leaving him destitute upon his eventual release. Marcus Turner's testimony had earned him witness protection, but his freedom was limited. Weekly check-ins, monitored communications, restricted movement. He lived in constant fear that one of his former associates would find him. Meanwhile, Nathan Steele's empire had grown. Steele Security Solutions had expanded internationally, specializing in exposing corruption in legal and financial systems. The company's quantum encryption technology had become the global standard for secure communications. The Steele Foundation, established with the recovered assets, had exposed corrupt judges in 27 states. Diana Morrison headed its investigative division, working closely with federal agencies to prosecute judicial misconduct. Dr. Grace Chen's encryption analysis tools, developed during the investigation, had revolutionized digital forensics. She now led Steele Security's cybersecurity division, training a new generation to fight digital corruption. James Rodriguez, fully exonerated, had built the company's new judicial investigation unit. His team specialized in protecting whistleblowers and gathering evidence against corrupt officials. Their conviction rate was perfect. Rebecca Martinez's financial forensics methodology had become required study in accounting programs nationwide. She'd written a textbook on detecting judicial corruption through financial analysis, dedicated to Catherine Walsh's memory. Judge Martha Sullivan, though retired, served as a special advisor to the Judicial Reform Committee. Her statistical models for detecting patterns of corrupt rulings had been adopted by court systems across the country. Frank Morgan had found purpose in training new investigators at the Steele Foundation. His experience with the Walsh investigation helped create protocols for protecting whistleblowers within law enforcement. Audrey Steele, now 25, had indeed followed in her adoptive father's footsteps. She ran Steele Security's European division, expanding their anti-corruption work internationally. Her team had recently exposed a network of corrupt judges in Eastern Europe. Alexander's work as a prosecutor focused exclusively on judicial corruption cases. He'd earned a reputation as ruthless as Nathan's, pursuing corrupt judges. Defense attorneys feared seeing him enter a courtroom. The twins maintained contact with Nathan, but their relationship was professional rather than personal. He'd educated them, funded their careers, and taught them to be as unforgiving of betrayal as he was. They'd learned their lessons well. Nathan himself had never remarried. His focus remained on his mission, expanding his work globally. Those who knew him said he'd found satisfaction in systematically destroying corrupt power structures, though he never spoke of it directly. Victoria's betrayal had transformed him from a successful businessman into something more dangerous, a man dedicated to dismantling corruption with the same ruthless efficiency he'd once applied to building his business. Claire Bennett's law firm had partnered permanently with Steele Security, creating a unique hybrid of legal expertise and investigative capability. Their joint operations had brought down corrupt judges across 3 continents. The Price of Betrayal case, as it became known in legal circles, was now taught in law schools as a warning. The court transcripts, evidence files, and case history filled 3 textbooks. Students studied how a single act of betrayal had exposed decades of corruption. In the end, Victoria's conspiracy had accomplished something she'd never intended. It had created a mechanism for exposing and destroying corrupt judges worldwide. Her attempt to destroy Nathan Steele had instead given him a new purpose, one that would outlive all of them. Nathan's revenge hadn't just been personal. He'd transformed it into a systemic change, ensuring that future generations would have tools and methods to fight judicial corruption. His enemy's betrayal had unleashed something they'd never anticipated, a legacy of justice that would continue long after they were forgotten in their prison cells. The final irony wasn't lost on Victoria as she signed Alexander's document in her prison cell. She tried to steal Nathan's empire through corruption of the legal system. Instead, she'd helped him build something far larger, an international network dedicated to destroying people like her. That was Nathan Steele's true revenge. He hadn't just destroyed his enemies. He'd turned their betrayal into a weapon against corruption itself. The price of betrayal, as Victoria and her conspirators had learned, wasn't just their freedom or their wealth. It was knowing that their own actions had created the system that would ensure their legacy was one of failure and cautionary tales. Nathan had won, completely and irrevocably. But more than that, he'd turned his victory into a transformation of the very system his enemies had tried to corrupt. That was the final price of their betrayal. Knowing that they hadn't just failed, they'd helped create something that would hunt down and destroy others like them for generations to come. In his office atop the new Steele Security headquarters, Nathan reviewed reports from his global operations. Photos of Walsh, Rodriguez, and others who'd helped expose the conspiracy lined one wall. Reminders of the cost of fighting corruption. But it was the screen showing live feeds from the prisons holding Victoria, Hawthorne, and their conspirators that held his attention. A decade later, his revenge was still paying dividends. And Nathan Steele still watched, ensuring the price of betrayal remained eternally high. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.